This video covers working with basic formulas. This video is using the file called sample files, and the first part of the video I'm using a worksheet called profit. In this worksheet it shows sales numbers for a small variety store, it shows their expenses, and I want to figure out what their profit is. There are four major steps for putting in a basic formula. The first step is you make sure that you're active in the cell where you want the answer to appear. The second step is you start a formula by putting in an equal sign, and rather than type an equal sign on the keyboard, I put up on my quick access toolbar. We learned this in a previous lesson. I put an equal sign up there, so I'll click on that to start my formula. So that's the second step. You start your formula with an equal sign, and then you put information into your formula. So in this case, I want to put cell B1 into my formula. So rather than type B1, I'll click on cell B1. I want to subtract from that something, so I'll click on the minus sign, and then I'll put B2 into the formula. So the third part is you put the parts of the formula that you need in to the calculation. Now, the fourth part is I want to finish off the formula. So I'll take my mouse up to the check mark above column C and click, and it'll give me the answer 50,141. And up in the formula bar, it shows me the formula that I put in. So in my case, I use cell addressing for it, and it's always a good idea to use cell addressing, because if I were to change the value in cell B1, for example, to 98,252 and touch enter, it'll automatically change the answer for me in the profit line. If I had actually used the contents of the cells in the formula and made a change here, the answer would not change down here. So generally speaking, when you do a formula, you want to make sure that you're using cell addressing in it. That's our first example of doing a basic formula. And again, the four steps of building a formula are: make sure you're active in the cell where you want the answer to appear, enter an equal sign to start a formula, enter the different parts of your formula using mathematical symbols like plus sign, minus sign, and then when you're finished, finish off your formula, and one way to do that is to use the check mark above column C. For the second example of building a basic formula, I'm still in the same file, sample files. I'm on a different sheet though called formula. In here I have a list of different services in an organization. It shows their 2011 units of service compared to their 2012 units of service. And what I want to figure out by putting in a formula is what the difference is between the 2012 units of service compared to the 2011 units of service for the adolescent services. So again, the first step is as I click in the cell where I want the answer to appear, in this case that's cell D5, I'll start a formula by putting in an equal sign. Then I'll use my mouse and put in the parts of the formula. I'll put in C5. I'll subtract that from something, equals C5 minus. I'll put B5 into the formula. I'll finish off the formula by clicking on the check mark, and I get the answer 800. So again, click in the cell first of all, equal sign to start a formula, enter the parts of your formula using mathematical symbols like minus sign, plus sign, and then finish off your formula by clicking on the check mark. Continuing on in the same spreadsheet, I now want to click in cell E5. I want to figure out if the first service variance is 800, what is that 800 as a percentage of what they did back in 2011? So another formula. I'm in the cell where I want the answer to appear. I put an equal sign in to start a formula. I'll put D5 into the formula by clicking. I'm going to divide this by clicking on the division sign, and then I'll click on cell B5, which is where the 2011 units of service are. The formula again is equal D5 divided by B5. I'll click on the check mark to finish off the formula. Now in this case, I get the correct answer. It doesn't look very professional though, so I want to now format this into a percent format. Again, we did this in our earlier session as well. I'll take my mouse up on the ribbon, click on the percent symbol. It'll convert that to a percent format with no decimals. I want to put on a decimal place or two, so I'll move to the right of percentage. I'll go past comma. The next button says increase decimal. I'll click on that once or twice, and I get my answer 26.67%. Again, so I click in a cell first, equal sign to start a formula, and put the parts of the formula in using mathematical symbols like the division sign, and then when you're finished, finish off the formula by clicking on the check mark to finish it off. The next thing I want to do is calculate the variance for all the other services in the spreadsheet. So I'm going to go back to cell D5. Up on the formula bar, the formula is equals C5 minus B5. In the next cell, I want to put in equals C6 minus B6. The next cell equals C7 minus B7, and so on. But I'm not going to do the work myself. I'm going to have Excel do the work for me. I want to copy this formula down for all the other services in the spreadsheet. So I'll take my mouse to the bottom right corner of cell D5. I'll get a black cross, which is a dragging handle. I'm going to hold my mouse button down and drag it down to row 15. And what it does, it calculates for me all the variances for all the other parts of the organization. Let's understand what happened. I'm going to go to cell D5 and click. Up on the formula bar equals C5 minus B5. That's what I put in earlier. I'm going to go to cell D6, and up on the formula bar, it's the same formula sort of, but as I copy it down a row, it changes the rows on me in the formula. It's now equals C6 minus B6. I'll click on the next cell, equals C7 minus B7, and so on. So you can use the black cross and drag it down to copy your formula all the way down in a column. Now, there is a faster way to do this. First of all, I'm going to undo what I just finished doing to get rid of all the formulas except for the one that's in cell D5. This time, I'm going to take my mouse to the bottom right corner of cell D5, get that black cross again, and rather than drag it down this time, I'm going to do a double click. So when I double click, it quickly copies it down for me. Now this works when there's some data nearby. So in this case, it'll look in column C for a blank cell. When it sees the first blank cell, it'll know to stop above that. So this is a really fast way for copying a formula. It's exactly the same result as if you dragged it down. But imagine if you had 300 or 400 rows in here, you'd save yourself lots of time by using that double click method. Let's try the whole thing again. I'll click in cell E5. Up on the formula bar, it is equal D5 divided by B5. I want to copy this down for all the other services. So I take my mouse to the bottom right corner of that cell. I get a black cross. I could drag it, but instead of dragging it, I'll do a double click, and it quickly copies it down for all the other cells in that column. So just to understand what happened, if I move down to, say, E10 and look up on the formula bar, and notice that it changed to be equal D10 divided by B10. Excel automatically changes the address for us when we go to copy the formula. The next formula I want to do is a bit of a different kind of a formula. It's a summation formula. I'm going to click in cell B16. What I want to do here is add up all the numbers in column B so I get my grand total of the 2011 units of service. This is such a common feature in Microsoft Excel that Excel gives us a button called the Auto Sum button in order to do this. The Auto Sum button incorporates the equal signs, so we don't need to put an equal sign in this case. So we're in cell B16. That's the first step is you want to make sure that you're in the cell where you want to put the answer to your formula. What will happen here, Microsoft Excel will look above it for numbers. It'll automatically pick these numbers up above it and try to add these numbers up for us. So once we're in cell B16, we'll move up on the ribbon. We're on the Home tab. We're going to move across on the ribbon to Auto Sum. Looks like a bit of a sigma sign on it. I'll click on the words Auto Sum, and what it does, it builds a formula for us, including the equal sign, and it's going to sum up the numbers above it. And it shows us with these marquee lines around it that it wants to sum from B5 to B15. Microsoft Excel automatically looks above it for numbers when you go to do summations. I'll click on the check mark to finish this off, and I get the grand total of 30,190. Now I could go to cell C16, do the same thing, auto sum, check mark, and so on. But instead of doing that, I want to take the formula that's in cell B16 and copy it across to column C and column D. We're going to use the black cross again, but this time the black cross, you cannot do a double click. The black cross is only helpful when we go to do double clicking when you want to copy down in the column. You can use the black cross for copying across columns, but you can't use the double click feature for it. So to copy this formula, I'll put my mouse in cell B16, I'll get a black cross, and this time I'll drag it across over to column D, and it copies the formula across for me and adds the numbers up in column C and the numbers up in column D. So the one I started with was back here, summing from B5 to B15. The next one is in cell C16, and when you copy the formula from one column to another column, it doesn't change the rows on you. What it does, it changes the columns on you instead. We're now summing up from C5 to C15. In the next cell in column D, we're summing up from D5 to D15. So the auto sum button you can use for adding up a column. You can then copy that across from one column to another column for adjacent columns. For the next example, I'm in the same file, sample files, but I've now changed to a different worksheet at the bottom called Marks. You saw in the previous example that when you click in a cell and you use auto sum, the system automatically wants to add numbers above it. Now in this case here, we have a list of students, and we have their marks for 3 months, January, February, and March. And what I want to do is get a grand total of their marks for John, for Sally, Sue, and so on. So this time I'll click in cell E2. I want to add the numbers up going across this time. Again, what Excel does when you use auto sum, it automatically looks above it for numbers. If it doesn't find numbers above it, in this case, it's going to automatically add numbers off to the left. So it does a cross add for us. So we're in cell E2. I'll go back to the ribbon again, click on auto sum. It doesn't find numbers above it, so it automatically looks off to the left for numbers, puts the marquee lines around it again. It builds the sum formula for us again. It's doing the right thing, so we'll click on the check mark, and that'll give us our grand total of the marks for John for the period January, February, and March. I'm going to copy this formula down for Sally, Sue, and so on. So I'll get a black cross, and I'll do a double click, and now I've copied down the formula for the other people in this list. So auto sum is used not only for adding numbers above it, it's also used for adding numbers off to the left of it as well. I now want to talk about how you can override the built-in rules that Excel follows when you use the auto sum button. I'm going to click in cell B11, and what I want to do this time is I want to add the numbers up for the first 4 students in the spreadsheet. Now what Excel is going to automatically want to do is it's going to try to add up all the numbers that it sees above it. I don't want that to happen, so I'll be overriding what Excel's rules are. So first of all, I click on the cell where I want the answer to appear, which in this case is cell B11. I click on auto sum, and what it does, it looks above it and says, okay, I think you want me to add all these numbers up here. That's not what I want to have happen. I only want to add the first 4 students' numbers up for whatever reason. So I'll just take my mouse into the first cell that I want to add up. I'll hold my mouse button down and drag down and select the cells that I want to add up. And you notice the formula changes to be equal sum B2 to B5. Same thing down here. I'll click on the check mark to finish off the formula, and I get the answer showing up in that cell. So sometimes you want to be able to override what Excel wants to do, and all you do is you start auto sum, then you use your mouse and you just drag to the cells that you want to add up. I'm going to just get rid of this so to keep my spreadsheet clean by clicking on undo. The same idea here. I'm going to go over to cell G1 and click. Now in this case, what I want to be able to do is I want to add up all the January marks for all the students, but I want to put the answer over in G1 this time. Now Excel is going to be confused about this because there's no numbers to the left of it, there's no numbers above it. It'll have no idea what I'm trying to do, but it can still make this work really easily. The idea here is if you want to put the answer to a calculation someplace else in the spreadsheet, you can still use the auto sum button for it. So I'm in cell G1. I'll start auto sum again. It says I'll start the sum formula for it, but I have no idea what to add up because I can't see any numbers above it. I can't see numbers off to the left. So all I do now is just take my mouse again to cell B2. I get the selecting tool. I hold my mouse button down and I drag down to row 7. I'm now going to sum from B2 to B7. I click on the check mark to finish off the formula, and I have the grand total of all the marks for all the students for the month of January. So it's a nice way to get answers to your calculation, but put the answers someplace else in your spreadsheet.